Thank you very much, Your Excellency Klaas, for joining us and for taking the time to speak to us. And I know you've just recently moved to Uzbekistan. How has it been settling in?
Well, I have discovered Tashkent, first of all. And of course, my aim is to discover the whole country. But in the past few weeks, I've had the opportunity to look around and to discover how rich a city Tashkent is, how much there is to do here. So I'm really looking forward to these years that I'm going to be spending here. I think it will be very interesting, both professionally, but also personally, because again, of all the many things that one can do here and that one can see here. So there's been some ups and downs in settling in, as there always is, but in general, I'm very much looking forward to my work and stay here.
And I can see from the maps on the walls you have a keen interest in the region's history.
I do. I love history. I love the politics of the region. I have been engaged with this region since 2015, when I was dealing with the whole Central Asia region from Brussels for several years. And since I stopped doing that in 2017, I was dealing with the South Caucasus, which in many ways is also linked to Central Asia historically and politically, and of course these days even more so. So I have many maps from the South Caucasus as well. So it will be exciting to discover the history of Uzbekistan in many ways, and also to discover the new Uzbekistan and the future that this region has, which is, I think, a really promising one.
Well, speaking of the new Uzbekistan, how do you see the EU here in Uzbekistan? How do you see it working with this country to get to its goals within 2030? Because they have that whole strategy to open up the economy, to bring in more free trade, to just really bring Uzbekistan to the world and bring the world to Uzbekistan, essentially.
Well, that is exactly what we're doing. We have our multi-annual program that is based on responding to the needs of Uzbekistan, whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in the transformation of the Uzbek economy, whether it is in environmental issues. I was listening very carefully to the president when I handed over my letters of credentials, and he was emphasizing to the extent to which a lot has been done here, and it is really visible, but a lot still has to be done in both practical terms, but also in terms of society, in terms of democratization of society. And in all these areas, we as EU, we want to, and we are supporting Uzbekistan.
And for Uzbekistan, they have a lot of various initiatives going on, and one of the biggest and most of the investment in the country is within green energy and the establishment of wind farms and solar farms. I understand that the EU has a carbon tax or a new regime coming through to reduce taxes on green energy.
Indeed.
How do you see Uzbekistan or Central Asia as a whole kind of engaging with that? And perhaps I spoke with the WTO Director General, and she said that this region should look towards exporting its green energy to Europe. How viable do you think that might be?
Well, we want to facilitate that. But of course, there's still a lot of work to be done to make this into a reality. So we are working with Uzbekistan, with the other Central Asian countries, to enlarge the amount of green energy that is being produced. but then to build the transmission lines to Europe, that is requiring a lot of investments. We are putting up a chunk of that, but of course there's still a lot more that needs to be done, because so there is a lot of money that needs to be spent on this, and we're talking not tens or hundreds of millions, we're talking about billions. But at the same time, Europe is a rich market and a good market to which to export, whether it is in goods, whether it is in electricity, in terms of energy. Europe is something that is a good partner for not only Uzbekistan but for the entire region. So it is worthwhile doing these investments, and we want to do them together with you in a way that benefits Uzbekistan and in a way that benefits us, because in the end, the more green energy we get, the cleaner our air is. The more green energy you produce, the more value Uzbekistan gets from it.
Well, picking up where you mentioned Uzbekistan exporting higher value goods, I know that has been historically an issue for a lot of this region, is just they've been exporting the raw materials, the iron ore, or just the raw gas, and it's being refined elsewhere. And that also, for me, brings in the notion of the middle corridor coming through this region, and not just being this region being a transit section, but an actual place for trade to be facilitated and a hub for value-added goods to be exported to the rest of the world. What challenges and opportunities do you see the middle corridor, the north and south variations experiencing, and for the region itself experiencing with those?
Well, first of all, I think it is very important to add value here. And of course, going into the shops, you see here in Uzbekistan, you see a lot of domestically produced, much higher value goods. The way that I can say that from my own personal experience as an Estonian, and the way that Estonia's economy was transformed was through the opening of the market to make Estonian producers have to compete with foreign producers, and actually it was a very revealing experience how quickly actually Estonian producers were able to shift and to adapt to international competition, and to start producing goods that were of equal quality but of at a lesser price, and therefore being competitive. And I think that there's lessons to be learned from that experience. The middle corridor, the Trans-Caspian transit corridor, is of key interest for the European Union. I think it is an extraordinary opportunity to tie Central Asia with Europe. We will actually have a ministerial meeting of transport ministers in Ashgabat now in the first days of October, and for precisely that purpose, to discuss how we can actually start moving from plans that have already been elaborated to even more concrete action. And so I think the linking of Europe and Central Asia, and specifically Uzbekistan, is a huge opportunity, because in the end the market, again, as I mentioned before, of Europe is one that demands high value goods, that is willing to pay high prices, and therefore is a genuine opportunity for Uzbek manufacturers to really start aiming for the higher end products and more refined products, because there is a market in Europe that is willing and able to pay for them.
That's very good news to hear. I'm sure the manufacturers here will be happy to hear that. And for another question I had about that corridor was, Uzbekistan is in its process of the accession to the WTO. They just signed a couple of agreements with 18 other countries around the world. And I know a lot of the local entrepreneurs, businessmen, manufacturers are still concerned about the impact it will have on their own businesses if they have to compete with foreign companies. And you've just said that in Estonia, it actually was beneficial for them. Do you think a similar story would play out here in Uzbekistan?
Well, I think it depends exactly on how you do it. Naturally, the government has to take care of jobs, of ensuring that the social fabric of society is protected, and that is an important aim for any government. At the same time, competition does, and opening up to competition ensures that the inefficient industries that actually suck money from the budget and don't add as much value, and in fact maybe even take away value, that these are not allowed to continue in perpetuity, that there is a pressure on industry, on producers to change, to adapt to competition. If you keep a market closed, then yes, you can develop domestic industry, but this domestic industry is not necessarily producing goods that are of as high quality or done as efficiently as they could be, because they don't have to.
Yes, that forcing is the bit of the part that we need to do. It's a lot of changing the mindset, and that's something that takes quite a while to change, unfortunately.
And at the same time, I mean, things cannot be done overnight, and there has to be a respect for again, as I said, the social well-being of the social fabric, making sure that there are no sort of disruptions, that society is sort of kept kept in order, at peace, but it is important to encourage sort of effective entrepreneurship, because that is the thing that makes economies grow.
Because there's been a lot of talk with a lot of experts saying that Central Asia should become more as a unit, present themselves as the C5, as opposed to each country engaging individually with the rest of the world. Do you think there's room for Central Asia to become more integrated? Not exactly like a Schengen zone like we see in the EU, but at least a more common market, or easier travel for tourists going in between?
I think certainly that will make Central Asia and the Central Asian countries as a whole even more attractive, because if it is easy for me as a tourist to arrive in one country, travel to the next, and then onwards to the next, that makes it perhaps even more likely that I will come to this region. Because if I then have to think about, well, I'm going to one country, and then I have to think about how do I get across the border to the other one, and it's going to take a lot of time. That's what I've heard. You know, it takes many hours to stand in line or something. then maybe, Central Asia is an extremely rich and a very interesting region as a whole. And I have, thanks to my previous job, actually traveled to all of the 5 countries and in the 5 countries. But it is not that close to Europe, for instance. And it's certainly not close to the United States, and it's not close to Southeast Asia either. So you have, if you want to attract tourists, the more you can work together, the better it will be. Certainly, Uzbekistan the tourism industry is growing, and we see that, and many measures that have been taken, for example, not demanding visas from EU citizens, have been very good steps. But if that can be then augmented by facilitating cross-border travel, if that can be augmented by reducing tariffs between the 5 countries, that will make Central Asia even more attractive as a tourist destination, as an investment destination. And also, if you look at it from the point of view of domestic industry, if you have, for example, a manufacturer in Uzbekistan, if he has a domestic market from which to start that is of 38, close to 40 million people, or if he has the entire Central Asian region as a domestic market from which to start and in which to sort of expand, that second option will make him even better prepared to expand to the world market. So anything that can be done to reduce barriers, I think, is a good thing. But of course, it will take time. And every region is different. The European Union experience is one. The Southeast Asian experience between the ASEAN countries is one. Central Asian experience will be yet another one.
And it will be unique in of itself.
Absolutely.
That actually, while you're talking, it made me think of the spread of ideas. And we've seen, especially in Uzbekistan over the last few years, people have more religious freedom now. And they have the ability to wear hijab, or men are allowed to now grow beards, whereas under the previous leadership, it was an extreme version of secularism. It was not allowed at all. And I've spoken to a few people who were at the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank annual meeting, and they were actually showing concern about this rise. But once they spoke to me, and I told them this is more or less just an excitement of being able to express their religion, to show their religious identity. They became more relaxed. But earlier in this year, we saw the attacks on the Crocus City Hall in Moscow with the gentleman from Tajikistan. And what I was wanting to ask was, how do you see the region dealing with extremism? What are the best ways to not only combat it, but to stop it from developing to that point?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I have a huge respect for religion, for any religion, and for Islam in particular. In the case of Uzbekistan, there's a rich history. There's important set of beliefs and of a foundation for a society. And in the end, if we look at countries, whether you can call many countries in Europe secular these days, but their foundations, the sort of the on which these countries were built on, and the traditions are steeped in the religion of the country. And of course, the same applies to Uzbekistan or any of the Central Asian countries. religion is, and the Islamic religion is and will remain a core foundation for society. At the same time, I think what the president was emphasizing again when we had when I handed my letters of credentials over was the importance of education, and I think that is absolutely crucial. The importance of access to education, of modern education, the access for women to education, and to value women as equal partners in society, and their contribution to the economy, to society, to the fabric of the nation, and so I think these two things go hand in hand. One is respect for traditions, respect for religion. At the same time, the importance of education, of equality, whether it is between women and men, or whether it is in general in terms of everybody being equal before the law. So if you combine these two, and if you work on these two, then again, religion is and will remain a key foundation, but it cannot and it should not be the only one. So that I think is the right way forward. That the importance of the state investing in educating and in ensuring that society is ready to face the challenges of the modern era.
And considering we're on this topic of religious extremism to the point where we have the Taliban right next door, and they, about 3 years now, they have been the leading party there in Afghanistan. What is the EU's stance in recognizing the Taliban? Because I saw a report a couple of months back that the EU is looking to engage more closely with Afghanistan for the access of minerals. What do you think?
The EU is present in Afghanistan. We actually have a diplomatic representation in Kabul. But that does not mean that we recognize the present government in de facto government in Kabul. We engage with the de facto authorities, but to the extent where we feel comfortable, and that means humanitarian support. That means also working with them to push for those aims that we do have, which is also allowing freedom of movement for individuals. Naturally, we are very much concerned about the situation of women in Afghanistan.
Yeah, they just passed a law that women are not allowed to talk to other men or barter in the bazaar.
And that, I think, is simply, we think is simply wrong. Simply wrong. Women are half of society, and women can be housewives, and women can also be presidents of countries and everything in between. And therefore they need to have equal access to education, equal access to healthcare, equal access to everything. And that is a fundamental principle from which we will certainly not deviate. We are engaging with the de facto authorities. I have discussed this with a number of Uzbek representatives here over the past weeks. We recognize the importance of Afghanistan to Uzbekistan in many ways. Of course, it's your neighbor. There are many ethnic Uzbeks there. It's also a way to export your goods, to looking towards the seaports. So there are very many important reasons for Uzbekistan to be interested in what is happening in Afghanistan, and to see how to realize its economic interests by working with the de facto authorities. But we also think that there are certain limits beyond which we are not convinced at this stage. And as I say, we are engaging also in regular discussions with the Uzbek authorities on these issues. We are not convinced to what extent what is the best way of achieving some change in the approaches of the de facto authorities in Afghanistan. We certainly will not be recognizing the present rulers. But again, we are there in Kabul. We have our good reasons for continuing to be there. We are engaging within the framework of what we believe is appropriate, but at the same time we are looking and we are convinced that a lot has to change in Afghanistan.
And I know that the delegation here in Uzbekistan has a few programs for Afghan women. Do you mind telling me a little bit more about that?
We have indeed worked with Afghan women here, and we have worked to train Afghan women. The problem now is what you mentioned before, the fact that it has become so restrictive in Afghanistan. That approach doesn't work anymore, because we cannot, if we train Afghan women here, they cannot go back to Afghanistan because they cannot work in the field that they would be trained in. And we have also worked we have a project on training in Termez for Afghans, and also at Tashkent State University that we have supported, but it is a big question. How can we continue supporting Afghan women in a very practical way? But this particular approach, for the time being at least, seems to be difficult to continue.
And I know there are some programs, not within the EU, but there is one that educates women over the radio. And there's another one that is completely online, but that only really works if they have access to these things and access to electricity, which a lot of the provinces in Afghanistan still don't have. Speaking of resources, not only Afghanistan, Uzbekistan and the entire region is heavily reliant on these two rivers, the Amu Darya and the Sirdarya. And water is soon going to become a big issue here. Not to mention that the Taliban just recently built the Koshtepe Canal, which had a few incidences that resulted in massive water loss. How does the EU perceive this development of this canal, and what role do you envision the EU playing in helping with water resource management and perhaps water diplomacy, because we still have conflicts with Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan over that as well?
Well, first of all, I think Uzbekistan and President Mirziyoyev in particular have done a huge amount to actually address the question of joint water resource management in Central Asia. And in that sense, I think President Mirziyoyev's leadership really is recognized around the world in terms of really changing the approach to water management in the region and how to work together between the various countries. Now, challenge is Afghanistan, as you said, the Kosh-Tepa Canal. There we are in close contact with your authorities, with also the Turkmen authorities, and we want to help to make sure that this does not become something that has a really serious or serious impact. That the impact can be managed and mitigated. And for that, of course, I understand that your authorities are in contact with the de facto authorities in Afghanistan, and water is a scarce resource in this region, but therefore, of course, it has to be carefully managed. So, in some cases, it's a question not only of whether there is one more project for like the Kosh-Tepa Canal, but just as important, how it is being implemented. What is being done to protect evaporation? What is being done to protect water seeping into the soil, just getting lost? And these are two crucial questions that we really, I think, have to pay even more attention to, because I remember from my previous job when I was dealing with Georgia. There also Georgia, while it has the Caucasus, it has the Black Sea, there are very lush areas of Georgia, but there are also areas where water is also a scarce resource. And I saw irrigation channels that were simply open to the elements, and it also gets very hot in Georgia, so you lose half of the water just by evaporation. How much more can be done to actually make sure that water is not lost, that there is every single drop that is available is being used for a specific purpose, and
more efficiently.
More efficiently. So if even challenges such as the Kosh-Tepa Canal can perhaps be addressed in a way that is that on the one hand increases the availability of water for irrigation, but at the same time ensures that also those areas that are dependent on what is already there are not worse off. But this requires a lot of very careful thinking and a lot of very careful implementation.
This brings me on to most recently we had Mr. Schulz from Germany was here for a visit, and they had signed a few agreements, one of which was to bring labor migrants to Germany and to the EU. And I also recently saw in the news that in Germany there are some people who are singing songs saying Germany is for the Germans and immigrants should leave. This is quite a dilemma that they find themselves in. Which brings me to the question of the acceptance of migrants from Central Asia and Uzbekistan in the EU. How can these two kind of opposite ideologies, sides of thinking, come together to make a working environment that is easier for the migrants? And I know that Europe is in need of a workforce, and this is one of the easiest ways to get it is through that. Currently, well, at least in 2020, 5.6 million international migrants from within this region. 7.8 are Central Asians living abroad, and 17% are in Germany. How does the EU view Uzbekistan's role in managing the migration corridors between Asia and Europe? And what can we do to address the evolving migration patterns and to bring more acceptance to migrant workers? So it's essentially a threefold question.
It is true, as you say, that Europe is aging, and to fill service sector jobs, you have to find the people from somewhere. And so, yes, Europe does need immigration. At the same time, as you say, there are political parties that are making good use of scare tactics to advocate against immigration and immigrants, labor migrants. So these are issues that national governments are tackling in different ways. In the European Union, this is essentially a matter for individual governments. So, as you said, I mean, Chancellor Scholz signed a separate, during his visit, the separate agreement was signed for labor migration to Germany specifically. It's not to the European Union, it's to Germany. So these are issues that individual member states are dealing with. But as a whole, it is, of course, for the EU member states a challenge to strike the right balance, to reassure the population that, and you were mentioning before, the question of culture, the question of identity. So that is also at the heart of some of these individuals' concerns in the European Union or in European Union member states, who say that, well, we want to make sure that our country stays, the culture stays recognizably as we have known it for decades and centuries. So these has to be addressed, and people have to be reassured that, in fact, well, first of all, no culture has ever stayed the same. Mm-hmm. Every culture evolves. It evolves thanks to immigration. It evolves thanks to new ideas. It evolves thanks to new technologies. So there is no such thing as stopping the clock. Everything evolves. The world around us evolves, and countries have to evolve with the world. I think it's simply a matter of in some cases there having been some instances where you've had a situation where migrants who have come to a country have not been well integrated, and have developed into have been allowed to sort of congregate in particular areas, and even certain governments have encouraged that the immigrants move to a particular area of the town or
create their neighborhoods
and create their own neighborhoods, where they then are not necessarily very well integrated with the society at large. And then you start potentially having some problems. It is important to think about that, to have a strategy to make sure that people who come to a particular country, like somebody who comes to Uzbekistan to live here, it is normal for that person should make an effort to learn Uzbek, and to respect Uzbek culture. It is likewise normal for anybody to, whether that person wants to move to Germany, or whether that person wants to move to Spain, or that person wants to move to Estonia, that person also respects the culture, the history, the traditions of that country. Having a better understanding in both directions, between those coming and those receiving, I think that way we can address these different concerns. But it's very easy for me to say here, but politicians in all our member states are grappling with these issues and are trying to strike the right balance, and it's always not always very easy.
And we know that fact-based journalism is important. And the media is one of the pillars of democracy. And it helps the governments and the courts and regulators. It keeps everyone accountable. We're the gatekeepers, essentially. And how do you see, especially in the context of Uzbekistan and within their 2030 strategy, the role of media freedom and transparency, and especially in key sectors like education, healthcare, and finance?
For me, as you said, the media is an essential element of any society, and it can really support a government. It can support the society in moving forward, because it really shines a light on developments. It allows decision makers to hear opinions that they may not necessarily hear from their own officials or their subordinates. The media can come with a report about problems in, well, let's say, public transport, for instance. That, well, this really there aren't enough buses in this one area. People are standing. People are complaining, but maybe the manager of the municipal transport authority, maybe he will not hear that from his subordinates, because the subordinates, they have not been very much interested in providing more buses to a particular area. So it's good for him to be able to read that from the media, to hear that from the media, that actually the people are complaining. I think in terms of the implementation of the strategy, I think again drawing on the president's words, the importance of democratization of society. There, the media plays a crucial role, and so I am very much heartened actually and I was very much inspired by the words that the president was using during our ceremony, because he was very much insistent on the importance of further democratization of society, of further opening up of society. The media is indeed a crucial player in terms of holding decision makers accountable, of holding implementers accountable, and also, very importantly, of saying what is being done well, and also of conveying examples from elsewhere. See, they're doing that there, they're doing that there, and these are good examples for Uzbekistan to follow. So a free and efficient media is a vital participant to any reform process. Do believe that is what also the president was telling us when he was emphasizing the importance of further opening up, of being open and of being accessible, and there again the media does play a vital role.
We've come to the end. Do you have any closing remarks, or?
Well, again, I'm very happy to be here in Uzbekistan, and I'm very grateful to you for having found the time for me.
Oh, I'm even more grateful. Thank you so much.